Hello, hello. The lag seems to be not terrible today, so for anyone who might watch this in the future, I'm still getting over my cold, so don't mind me. Alright, I'm just gonna get my set up. That's not what I want on.
We have suffered no damage, I hope. Not as far as I could see by the light of the lantern, but the carpenter has gone below to see if she's making water. The captain led the way down into the cabin. This was comfortably furnished and lighted by a swinging lamp. You come down too, also, Jacques. I shall want you to interpret. The captain was surprised when he saw by the light of the lamp that the person they had rescued was a lad, well-dressed, and evidently above the condition of a fisherman. Now, young sir, who are you, he asked, and what have you to say for yourself? The question was translated by Jacques. Like that, the lad said indignantly. What am I to say for myself? I think it's what you have to say for yourself. We were quietly fishing when you ran over us and sank the boat and drowned my friend Joe, and haven't even stopped for a moment to see if you could pick him up. I call it shameful and inhuman. The French captain laughed as Jacques translated the speech, the purport of which he had indeed made out for himself, for although he did not speak English, he understood it to some extent. Tell him it was his fault as much as ours. We did not see him till we struck him. And as for his companion, what chance was there of finding him on such a dark night as this? Why, by the time we had hove round and got back again, we might not have hit it within a quarter of a mile. Besides, if he had been alive, he would have shouted. Ralph saw, when he understood what the captain said, that there was truth in his words, and that the chances of discovering Joe would indeed have been slight, even had the vessel headed round. May I ask, Ralph said, what ship is this, and what are you doing with me? The ship is La Belle Marie of Dunkirk. As to what we are going to do with you, it is not so easy to say. Of course, you can jump overboard again if you like, but if not, you can stay on board until we have an opportunity of putting you ashore somewhere. How did you come to be on board a fishing smack? For I suppose it was a smack we ran down. I live in Dover, Ralph replied, and had only come out for a night's fishing. Well, you are in luck, the captain said. That will do, Jacques. Take him forward and sling a hammock for him. Hang up his clothes in the cook's galley. They will be dry by the time he wakes. Ralph asked no questions as he was taken forward as to the character of La Belle Marie. 6 guns were ranged along each side of her decks, and this, and the appearance of the captain's cabin, was sufficient to inform him that he had fallen into the hands of a French privateer. The craft had indeed left Dunkirk soon after nightfall, and was making her way down channel with every sail set when she'd run down the unfortunate fishing boat. Jacques, as he hung up the hammock, explained to the sailors, who crowded round, the character of the passenger who had so unexpectedly come on board. Poor lad, one of the sailors said good-naturedly. He'll be some time before he sees his mother again. He hasn't got a very bright outlook before him. A long voyage and then a prison. I will go and see if the cook has got some water hot. A glass of spirits will do him good. A few minutes later, Ralph was wrapped up in a blanket, and the warm glow produced by that and the glass of strong grog soon sufficed to send him soundly to sleep, in spite of the painful uncertainty of his position and of his sorrowful thought of his mother, who would in the morning be inquiring for him in vain. It was nearly midday before he woke. Looking round, he saw that he had the forecastle to himself. His clothes were lying on a chest close by, and in a few minutes he was on deck. A sense of disappointment stole over him. He had, while he was dressing, entertained the hope that on going on deck he'd see an English cruiser in pursuit, but the wind had dropped, and it was still thick, and his vision was confined to a circle of a quarter of a mile in diameter. Jacques nodded to him good-temperedly, for all on board the privateer were in high spirits. Their voyage had begun propitiously. The darkness of the preceding night had enabled them to run the gauntlet of the British cruisers in the narrow part of the channel.
Hey there.
They were now well down the coast of France.
How are you
and the
doing?
fog reduced their chances of being seen by an enemy to a minimum. Where are we? Ralph asked. We are somewhere off the mouth of the Seine, and I guess some 15 miles from the land. Oh, we're going down the channel then, Ralph said. And where are we going to? Aha! That question is for the captain to answer if he chooses, Jacques said. Are we going to touch at the next French port? Ralph asked anxiously. Not that I know of, unless we have the luck to pick up one of your merchantmen, and we might then escort her into port. But unless we do that, we do not touch anywhere, luckily for you. Because after all, it's a good deal pleasanter cruising in the Belle Marie than kicking your heels inside a prison. I know pretty well, for I was for 4 years a prisoner in your English town of Dorchester. That is how I came to speak your language. It was a weary time of it, though. We were not badly treated, not half so bad as I have heard that the men in some other prisons were. So I owe you English, no ill will on that account, and from what I have heard, some of our prisons are worse than any of yours. I used to knit stockings and wraps for the neck. My old mother taught me when I was a boy, and as we were allowed to sell these things, we got pretty comfortable. Besides, what's the use of making yourself unhappy? I had neither wife nor children to be fretting about me at home, so I kept up my spirits. How did you get back? Ralph asked. Were you exchanged? No, Jacques answered. I might have waited long enough before that. I can't make out myself why the two governments don't agree to exchange prisoners more quickly. I suppose they take about an equal number. Your men of war ships capture more prisoners than ours, but we make up for it by the number of our privateers bring in. At any rate, they might exchange as many as they can, say, once in 6 months. One would have thought they would be glad to do so as to save themselves the trouble and expense of looking after and feeding such a number of useless mouths. Governments always have curious ways. But how did you get away from prison? Ralph asked. It was a woman, Jacques replied. It is always women who help men out of scrapes. It was the wife of one of the jailers. She used to bring her husband's dinner sometimes when we were exercising in the yard. When I first went there, she had a child in her arms, a little thing about a year old. I was always fond of children, for we had a lot at home, brothers and sisters, and I was the eldest. She saw me look at it one day, and I suppose she guessed it reminded me of home, so she stopped and let me pat its cheek and talk to it. Then I knitted it some socks and a little jacket and other things, and that made a sort of friendship between us. You can always win a woman's heart by taking notice of a child. Then she got to letting me carry it about on my shoulder while she took her husband's dinner into him. If he did not happen to be in the yard, and when the little thing was able to totter, it would hold onto my finger, and was always content to stay with me while she was away, so it went on till the child was somewhat 4 years old. One day it was running across the court to its mother as she came out from the prison. Two of the men were what you call skylarking and running one way while the child was running the other. One of them knocked it down heavily. It was an accident. And if he had picked it up and been sorry, there would have been an end to it. But instead, that brute burst into a loud laugh. By this time, I was as fond of the child as if it had been my own, and I rushed furiously at him and knocked him down. As he sprang to his feet, he drew a knife he used in wood carving and came at me. I caught the blow in my arm and closed with him, and we fell together. The guard in the yard rushed up, pulled us apart. We both got a fortnight's close confinement for fighting. The first time I came into the yard again and met the woman with her child, the little one ran to me, but the woman, a little to my surprise, said nothing. As she passed, I lifted the child up, and after giving him a hug and a kiss, she said, "Mammy gave me this to give to you." And she put a little note into my hand. I took the first opportunity to read it in a quiet corner. It was as follows. Dear Jacques, I saw how nobly you stood up for my Carrie the other day, and how you got wounded in protecting her. You have always been good to her. I have often thought I might help you to escape, but was afraid to try. Now I will do so. It will not be easy, but I will manage it. Do not be impatient. The child will give you another note when I have quite arranged things. I shall not talk much to you in future, or else when you have got away I may be suspected. So do not be surprised at my seeming coldness. After that, the woman only brought her child once a week or so to the prison, and only gave me a nod as she passed through the yard. Upon the third visit of the child, it gave me a little packet containing 2 or 3 small steel saws and a little bottle of oil. On the paper which held them was written, "For the bars, you shall have a rope next time." Sure enough, next time the child had hidden in its frock a hank of very thin cord, which I managed as I was playing with her to slip unobserved into my breast. Mama says, "More next time." And next time another Hank came. There was a third, and a note. Twist the 3 ropes together and they will be strong enough to bear you. On the 3rd night from this, saw through the bars and lower yourself into court. There will be no moon. Go to the right-hand corner of the court in the rear of the prison. Fasten a knife to one end of the cord and throw it over the wall. I shall be waiting there with a friend. Directly you feel the cord jerk, climb up to the top of the wall. If you can find something to fasten your end of the rope to, you can slide down it. If not, just jump. There will be a boat ready to take you away. And it all turned out well. It was a pitch-dark night, raining and blowing, and the sentries kept inside their boxes. I got up to the top of the wall all right and was able to fasten the rope onto the spikes and slide down on the other side. The woman was there with a man whom she told me was her brother. They took me to a creek 2 miles away and there put me on board a boat, and I was rowed out to a smuggling craft, which at once set sail, and 2 days later I was landed at Cherbourg. So that's how I came to learn English. Did you ever hear whether the woman who helped you was suspected? I saw her brother 2 months afterward on one of the trips that the craft he belonged to made. He said that of course there were a great many inquiries made, and his sister had been questioned closely. She swore that she had hardly spoken to me for the last 2 months and that she had given me nothing, which in a way was true enough, as she had not handed them to me herself. The prisoners bore her out for not coming near me, for it had been noticed that she was not as friendly as she had been. Some thought her ungrateful, while others had fancied that she was angry at my interfering and making a tumult about the child. Anyway, whatever suspicions they might have had, they could prove nothing. They forbade her entering the prison in future, but she didn't mind that, so long as her husband, who had been employed a good many years there, did not lose his situation. He had been kept by her in entire ignorance of the whole affair and was very indignant at her having been suspected. I sent her a letter of thanks by her brother and a little present for her and one for the child. The brother was to give them to her as if from himself, so that the husband should not spell a rat, and of course to make her understand who they came from. Well, I only hope, Jacques, Ralph said, that when I get shut up in one of your prisons, I shall find some Frenchwoman to aid me to escape, just as you found an Englishwoman to help you. Only I hope it won't be 4 years coming about. I think we look sharper after our prisoners than you do. Still, it may be, but it will be some time before you're in prison. And if you play your cards well and learn to speak our language and make yourself useful, I do not think the captain is likely to hand you over to the authorities when we get back to a French port again. I'm quite ready to do my best to learn the language and to make myself useful, Ralph said. It's always a good thing to know French, especially as I'm going into the army someday. That is, if I get back again in time. Oh, I think you will do so, Jacques said. You keep up your spirits well, and that is the great thing. There are many boys that would sit down and cry if they found themselves in such a scrape as you have got into. Cry? Ralph repeated indignantly.
The offense.
You don't suppose a boy of my age is going to cry like a girl? An English boy would be ashamed to cry, especially when Frenchmen were looking on. Jacques laughed good-naturedly. There would be nothing to be ashamed of. We are not like you cold English. A Frenchman laughs and sings when he is pleased and cries when he is sorry. Why shouldn't he? Oh, I can't tell you why, Ralph replied.
Only we don't do it.
I don't say I shouldn't halloo out if I were hurt very much, though. I should try my best not to. But I feel sure I shouldn't cry like a great baby. Why, what would be the good of it? Jacques shrugged his shoulders. People are different, he said. A man is not a coward because he cries. I have seen 2 boys fighting and pulling each other's hair and crying all the time, but they fought on. They did not cry because they were afraid. Pulling each other's hair, Ralph repeated contemptuously.
The
They ought to have been
offense.
ashamed of themselves, both of them. I don't call that fighting at all. I find it disgusting. Why, in England, even girls would hardly pull each other's hair. I've seen 2 or 3 fights between fishwomen in Dover, and even they do not go on like that. If that's the way French boys fight, no wonder our soldiers and sailors... But here it struck Ralph that the remark he was about to make would be altogether out of place under present circumstances. He therefore seized with an opportune fit of coughing, and then turned the conversation by asking Jacques at what rate he thought the vessel was slipping through the water. A few minutes later, the first mate came up and told Jacques to inform Ralph that the captain had ordered him to be supplied with clothes similar to those worn by the rest of the crew, and that he was to be told off to take his post regularly as a boy in the starboard watch. Ralph was well pleased at the news. He felt that his best chance was to make himself useful on board and to become one of the crew as soon as possible, so that, in case an English merchantman was met with and captured, He should not be sent
I'm
with our crew as
feeling
a
like her
prisoner to a
hair is
French
going to end
fort.
up looking really
As long as he was
highlighted
on
and
board, various
blue,
opportunities of escape might present themselves.
which is not the
He might slip away in
intention. So
port, or
I'll
the brig might be captured
probably
by an English cruiser or privateer.
uh,
Whereas once
take down
lodged in
the
a French prison, the
opacity
chances of such good fortune as had befallen Jacques
a bit.
were very slight
Let's
indeed.
see.
He therefore at once turned to with alacrity. That he would have a hard time of it for a bit he felt sure, for although in Jacques he had evidently found a friend, he saw by the scowling glances of several of the men as he passed near them that the national feeling told heavily against him. Nor was it surprising that it should be so. The animosity between the two nations had lasted so long that it had extended to individuals. Englishmen despised as well as disliked Frenchmen. They were ready to admit that they might be brave, but considered them as altogether wanting in personal strength. The popular belief was that they were half-starved and existed chiefly upon frogs and hot water, with a few bits of bread and scraps of vegetables in it, which they called soup, and that upon the sea especially they were almost contemptible. Certainly the long succession of naval victories that our fleets had won afforded some justification for our sailors' opinion of the enemy. But in fights between detached vessels, the French showed many times that, in point of courage, they were in no way inferior to our own men. And indeed our victories were mainly due to two causes. In the first place, the superior physique and stamina of our men, the result partly of race and partly of feeding. They were constantly able to work their guns faster and longer than could their adversaries. In the second place, the British sailor went into battle with an absolute conviction that he was going to be victorious, while the Frenchman, on the other hand, although determined to do his best to win, had from the first doubts whether the British would not be, as usual, victorious. It is probable that the French sailors hated us far more than our men did them. We had lowered their national prestige, had defeated them whenever
Hello,
we met them,
Kennedy. How are
had
you?
blockaded their ports, ruined their trade, inflicted immense damage upon their fisheries, and subsidized other nations against them, and were the heart and center of the coalition against which France was struggling to maintain herself. It was not therefore surprising that among the 110 men on board La Belle Marie, there were many who viewed Ralph with hostile eyes, and who only refrained from personal violence owing to the strict order the captain had given that he should be well treated. Toward midday, the fog lifted suddenly, and the wind freshened, and lookouts were stationed in the tops. There was little hope indeed of any English merchantmen having come over so far toward the French coast, but British cruisers might be anywhere. A few distant sails could be seen far out on the horizon, proceeding up or down channel, but the captain of La Belle Marie had no idea of commencing operations until very much further away from the shores of England. All day the vessel ran down the French coast, and although he was a captive and every mile reeled off the log took him further from home, Ralph could not help admiring the speed at which the brig slipped through the water, cutting the waves with her sharp bow and leaving scarcely a ripple behind her. So fine and clean was her run. Very different was this smooth, gliding motion from the quick plunge and shock of the bluff-bowed fishing boat to which he was accustomed. The sails had been scrubbed until there was not a speck upon them. The masts were lofty and tapering, the rigging neat and trim, and every stay as taut as iron. We could fight our ships better than the French, but as far as building and rigging went, they were vastly our superiors. And La Belle Marie looked to Ralph almost like a gentleman's yacht in its cleanness and order, and in these respects vied with the men of war that he had so often watched from the heights of Dover. He had, however, but little time for admiration, for he was kept at work rubbing and polishing the guns and brasswork, and was not idle for a minute from the time he came on deck dressed as a cabin boy on the morning after he was picked up until sunset. There were two French boys about his own age forward, and as soon as his work was done and the evening watch set, they began to torment him, for, acting as they did as servants to the officers, they did not take share in the watch. Fortunately, Jacques had gone below at the same time as Ralph, and when the boys, finding that their taunts had no effect whatever upon Ralph, began to get bolder, and one of them snatched off his cap, Jacques interfered at once. "Look here, youngsters," he said. "This young English boy is at present one of the crew of this brig, and he has just the same right of fair treatment as anyone else. So I warn you, if you interfere with him, you will have to fight him fairly. I know enough of these English boys to know that with your hands you would not have the least chance with him. He could thrash you both at once, for even little English boys do not wrestle, tear, and kick, but hit straight out just as the men do. With swords it would be different, but in a row between you and him it would be just the naked hands. So I advise you to leave him alone, for if you make him fight, I will see fair play. All the time I was a prisoner in England, I was well treated by his people, and just as I was treated myself and saw other French prisoners treated, so I will see him treated. Before this voyage is over, it is not impossible the tables will be turned, and that you may find yourselves prisoners in the hands of the English. So I recommend you to behave to him in the same way you would like to be treated yourselves, if you were taken prisoners. I can see the lad is good-tempered and willing. He is a stranger here among us all, he can't speak a word of our language, and he has a right to fair treatment. When he gets to know our language, he will be able to shift for himself, but until he does, I mean to look after him, and anyone who plays tricks on him has got to talk to me. Jacques Cléry was
Again,
one of
I
the most
say
powerful
I
and
love
active men on
Jacques.
board the brig. This assertion was sufficient to put a stop to practical joking with Ralph, and the lad had a much easier time of it than he expected. The men, finding him willing to work and anxious to oblige in every way, soon took to him, and by paying attention to their talk, and asking the French name of every object on board the ship, it was not many days before Ralph found himself able so far to understand that he could obey orders, and pull and haul on any sheet that needed it. Upon the second day, the wind having dropped again, more sail was set, and when the word was given to go aloft, he went up with the rest, and although he was of little practical use in loosing the gaskets, he soon shook off his first feelings of discomfort and nervousness on seeing how carelessly and unconcernedly the men on each side of him did their work. And before he had been many days at sea, was as quick and active aloft as any of the hands on board the brig. After running down nearly as far as Bordeaux, the vessel's head was pointed west, and by nightfall the French coast was out of sight. A vigilant lookout was now kept, one man being constantly stationed aloft, and by the increased animation of the crew, Ralph judged that they would soon arrive at a point where they should be on the course of homeward-bound merchantmen. He had quite made up his mind that, although ready in all other matters to do his duty as one of the crew of La Belle Marie, nothing should induce him to take part in a fight against his own countrymen. As soon as night fell, sail was reduced, and in the morning, when at 8 bells Ralph came on deck with his watch, he found that the whole of the upper sails had been taken off her and the topsails lowered onto the cap, and the brig was only moving through the water at the rate of 2 or 3 knots an hour. He guessed that she must be just upon the track of ships, and that her object in thus taking off sail was to catch sight of vessels in the distance, while she herself would be unobserved by them. During the course of the day, several sail were seen passing, but all at a considerable distance. Either the captain did not think that it was safe to commence operations at present, or he did not like the look of some of the passing vessels, but at any rate he made no movement to close with any of them, and it was not until nightfall that sail was again hoisted and the brig proceeded on her course. Ralph noticed that she carried no light, and that even the binnacle was carefully shaded so that its light could not be seen except by the helmsman. At midnight his watch went on deck, and Ralph perceived that while he had been below, the sail had again been greatly reduced, and noticed that from time to time the officer on watch swept the horizon with his night glass. He apparently observed nothing until about 2 o'clock in the morning, when he stood for some time gazing intently astern. Then he turned and gave an order to a sailor who went below, and 2 or 3 minutes later the captain came on deck. After speaking to the officer, he too gazed intently astern. Then the ship's course was suddenly changed, the sheets eased off, and for half an hour she ran at a sharp angle to the course she'd before been following. Then she was brought up into the eye of the wind and laid to. Although Ralph strained his eyes in the direction in which the captain had been looking, he could see nothing, but he had no doubt a sail had been seen coming up astern, and that the object of the change of course was to let her pass them without their being seen. He rather wondered that instead of running off the wind, the captain had not put her about so as to take her position to windward instead of to leeward of the vessel behind. But he soon arrived at the object of the maneuver. There were no stars to be seen, and the bank of clouds overhead stretched away to the east, and the horizon there was entirely obscured. But to the west, the sky was brighter, and a vessel would be clearly visible to the eye. The brig, therefore, in the position she had taken up, could not be seen, while she herself would obtain a full view of the other as she passed her. In an hour, the other ship came along. She was a large ship, full-rigged, and the French sailors, who had all come on deck, now clustered against the bulwarks and eagerly discussed her. She was about 2 miles to windward, and opinions differed as to whether she was a man-of-war or an Indiaman. Ralph rather wondered that the privateer had not tried to get alongside in the darkness and take the vessel by surprise, but he understood now that there was a strong probability that La Belle Marie might have caught a Tartar, and have suddenly run herself under the guns of a British frigate. As soon as the vessel had passed, the braces were manned and the yard swung round, and the brig continued her course. She was brought up almost to the wind's eye and sailed as closely as possible, so that when morning broke, she recovered the leeway she had made, and should be to windward of the vessel she was pursuing, no matter how much astern. Chapter 4. The Privateer's Rendezvous. When morning broke, the vessel that the privateer had been watching in the night was seen to be 3 miles directly ahead. She was a large vessel, and for some time opinions differed as to whether she was a frigate or an Indiaman. But when it became quite light, a patch or two in the canvas showed that she could not be a man of war. Then all sail was at once crowded onto the privateer. The other ship at once shook out more canvas, but half an hour sufficed to show that the privateer was much the faster vessel. The stranger took in the extra canvas she had set and continued her course as if altogether regardless of the privateer. "They've made up their minds to fight," the shark said to Ralph. "Now he finds that he can't outsail us, he has got on to easy working canvas. She's a big ship and I expect carries heavier metal than we do. It may be that she has troops on board." The brig kept beating out to windward until she gained a position about a mile upon the starboard quarter of the Indiaman. Then the long pivot gun was leveled and the first shot fired. The crew had by this time all taken their places by the guns, and Ralph and the other boys brought up powder and shot from the magazine. It was not without a struggle that Ralph brought himself to do this, but he saw that a refusal would probably cost him his life, and as someone else would bring up the cartridges in his place, his refusal would not benefit his countrymen. He'd just come on deck when the gun was fired and saw the water thrown up just under the ship's stern, and the shot was dancing away to leeward. The next shot struck the merchantman on the quarter. A moment later, the vessel was brought up into the wind, and a broadside of 8 guns fired. 2 of them struck the hull of the privateer, another wounded the mainmast, while the rest cut holes through the sails and struck the water a quarter of a mile to windward. With an oath, the captain of the privateer brought his vessel up into the wind and then paid off on the other tack. The merchantman carried much heavier metal than he had given her credit for. As she came round, too, some redcoats were seen on her deck. Apparently well satisfied with the display she'd made of her strength, the ship bore off again and went quietly on her way, while the privateer was hove to and preventer stays put up to the mainmast. Ralph remained below for some time. He'd heard the men savagely cursing, and thought it was best for him not to attract attention at present. The sails were lowered, and the brig drifted quietly all day. But about 10 o'clock, Ralph heard a creaking of blocks and knew that the sails had been hoisted again. Half an hour later, the watch below was ordered to come quietly on deck. Ralph went up with the rest. For a quarter of an hour he could see nothing, and then he made out a dark mass a few hundred yards to leeward. Immediately afterward, the helm was put up and the brig run down toward the stranger. 2 minutes later, there was a sharp hail, followed instantly by shouts and the sound of feet. But before the crew could gain the deck and prepare for defense, the brig was alongside, and a moment later her crew sprang upon the decks of the stranger. A few blows were given, but the resistance offered was slight, and in a very short time the crew was disarmed or driven below, and the vessel in the possession of the privateer. She proved to be a small bark on her way out to the Mediterranean. She carried only 20 hands and 4 small guns, and was laden with hardware. The privateer's crew at once set to work upon her. At first Ralph could not understand what they were about, but he was not long in discovering. The wedges round the mainmast were knocked out, the topmast lowered to the deck, the shrouds and stays slacked off, and then the mast was lifted and carried on board the brig. As soon as this was done, the second mate of the brig with 8 sailors went on board as a prize crew. Everything was made taut and trim for them by the brig's crew. The English prisoners
Guys,
had
I
already
do
been
not
disarmed
know
and
what
battened down in the
happened,
hold, and the
but
prize crew then hoisted sail and prepared
I
to take
lost
her
my
under mizzen
eye?
and foremast only to a French port.
I
This, if
don't
she
know
had
what it
luck, she would
is.
reach in safety, but
Hold on.
if on the way she fell in with a British privateer or cruiser, she would of course fall an easy prey. No sooner was the bark on her way than the privateersmen set to work to lift out their injured mainmast, and to replace it with that they had brought on board from the bark. When the daylight broke, anxious glances were cast round the horizon, but although a few distant sails were seen, none of these were following a course that would bring them near the brig, and the latter, without sail and with her foremast alone standing, would not be likely to be noticed. Ralph could not help admiring the energy with which the crew worked. Ordinarily, they were by no means a smart crew and did their work in a slow and slovenly manner, But each man now felt the importance of getting everything into water before an enemy appeared, and so well did they work that by midday the new mast was in its place, and before sunset the topmast with all its yards and gear was up and the sails ready for hoisting. Ralph had been in a state of anxiety in the early part of the night, lest he should be sent on board the bark and carried as a prisoner to France. But no one seemed to give a thought to him, and it was not until far on in the morning that the captain happened to notice him hard at work with the rest. "Ah, you are there," he said. "If I had thought of it, I would have sent you into Brest with the bark." Ralph did not understand the words, but he guessed at the meaning, and said, smiling, "I am quite content to remain where I am. Tell him, Jacques Cléry, that I have noticed that he works willingly, and as long as he behaves well, he shall have the same treatment as if he belonged really to the crew. But warn him that if he is caught at any time making a signal, or doing anything to warn a vessel we may be approaching, his brains will be blown out at once." Jacques translated the warning.
Oh, I
"That's all
found
right,"
it.
Ralph said. "Of course I should expect nothing else."
Okay.
As soon as the repairs were completed, the sails were hoisted, and the brig proceeded on her way. In the days that followed, it seemed to Ralph that the tactics of the privateer had changed, and that there was no longer any idea of making prizes. A sharp lookout was indeed kept for any English cruisers, but no attention was paid to any sail in the distance as soon as it was determined that these were not ships of war. 4 days later, instead of there being as before 5 or 6 sail in sight at one point or other of the horizon, the sea was absolutely deserted. He remarked upon this to his friend Jacques. The latter laughed. "We are out of their course now, my lad. We passed the latitude of Cape St. Vincent yesterday evening, and we are now pretty well off the coast of Africa. 9 out of 10 of the ships we have seen were either bound to the Mediterranean or on their way home. Now that we have passed the mouth of the strait, we shall not run across many sail." "Oh, where are we going to, then?" Ralph said. "Well, I don't think there is any harm in telling you now, but we are bound south, but how far is more than I know. I expect first we shall go west and try and pick up some prizes among the islands, and after that perhaps go round the Cape and lie in wait for Indiamen on their way home. You see, one of those ships is worth a dozen of these Mediterranean traders, and one is not bothered down there as one is between the strait and the channel with your cruisers and privateers. They swarm so that not one can hardly fire a gun without bringing them down on us. I don't suppose the captain would have meddled with that Indiaman if it hadn't been that he thought the owners would be pleased by a prize being sent in so soon. As to the bark, we were obliged to take her to get a new mast. It would never have done to have started on a long cruise with a badly injured spar." "But I should think it would be difficult to send home prizes from the West Indies," Ralph said. "Well, you see, although you have taken most of our islands, there are still 2 or 3 ports we can take prizes into. Besides, we can take the best goods out, and if the ship isn't worth the risk of sending to France, burn her. Then, too, one can spare hands for prizes better there, because one can always ship a few fresh hands, Spaniards, mulattoes, or blacks, in their place. But you can't do that in the case of the Indiaman. No, but a single laden Indiaman is enough to pay us well for all our trouble. We can put a crew of 30 hands on board her and send her home. There is little risk of a recapture till we get near France. We have only to hoist the English flag if we do happen to meet anything." Ralph was glad to hear that the ship was bound for the West Indies, as he thought opportunities for escape would be likely to present themselves among the islands. Madeira was sighted 3 days later, and after running south for another 400 or 500 miles, the brig bore away for the west. By dint of getting Jacques Cléry to translate sentences into French, and of hearing nothing but that language spoken round him, Ralph had by this time begun to make considerable progress in the language. Not only was he anxious to learn it for the sake of passing away the time and making himself understood, but his efforts were greatly stimulated by the fact that if any of the crew addressed him in French, a cuff on the head was generally the penalty of a failure to comprehend him. The consequence was that when 6 weeks after sailing the cry of land was shouted by the lookout in the tops, Ralph was able to understand almost everything that was said, and to reply in French with some fluency. As the brig sailed along the wooded shores of the first island they fell in with, Ralph was leaning against the bulkheads, watching the deep interest, the objects that were passing. "I can guess what you are thinking about," Jacques Cléry said, taking his place quietly by Ralph's side. "I've been through it all myself, and I can guess your feelings. You are thinking how you can escape. Now, you take my advice and don't you hurry about it. You are doing well where you are. Now, you begin to talk French and understand orders. It's a good deal easier for you than it was. and the men are beginning to regard you as one of themselves. But you may be sure that you will be watched for a time. You see, they daren't let you go. If you were to get to one of the English ports here, we should have 5 or 6 of your men of war after us in no time. If it was not for that, I don't suppose the captain would object to put you ashore. He has evidently taken a fancy to you and is pleased with the way in which you have taken things and with your smartness and willingness. Besides, I don't think he considers you altogether as a prisoner. Running you down in the way he did in the channel wasn't like capturing you in a prize. And I think if the captain could see his way to letting you go without risk to himself, he'd do it. As he can't do that, he'll have a sharp watch kept on you, and I advise you not to be in a hurry to try to escape. You must remember, if you were caught trying, they would shoot you to a certainty. I should be in no hurry at all, Jacques, if it were not that the brig is hunting for English vessels. You know that you could feel yourself if you were on board a ship that was capturing French craft. Yes, that is how, no doubt, Jacques agreed. And I don't say to you, don't escape when you get a chance. I only say wait until the chance is a good one. Just at present, we are not specially on the lookout for prizes. We're going to join 2 other vessels belonging to the same owners. They've been out here some time and have got a snug hiding place somewhere. But I don't think anyone on board except the captain knows where. For 3 weeks, the brigs cruised along the island. They picked up no prizes in that time, as the captain did not wish to commence operations until he joined his consort and obtained information from them as to the British men of war on the station. They'd overhauled 1 or 2 native craft, purchased fish and fruit, and cautiously asked questions as to the cruisers. The answers were not satisfactory. They learned that owing to the number of vessels that had been captured by the privateers, a very vigilant lookout was being kept. And 2 or 3 French craft that had been captured by the cruisers had been bought into the service and were constantly in search of the headquarters of the privateers. This was bad news, for although the brig with her great spread of canvas could in light winds run away from any of the ships of war, it was by no means certain she'd be able to do so from the converted privateers. One morning, 2 vessels, a schooner and a brig, were seen coming round a headland. The captain and officers examined them with their telescopes, and a flag was run up to the masthead. Almost immediately, 2 answering flags were hoisted by the strangers, and an exclamation of satisfaction broke from the captain. "We are in luck," he said. "If we had not run across them, we might have had to search for the rendezvous. I've got the spot marked down on the chart, but they told me before sailing they understood it was very difficult to find the entrance, that we might pass by within 100 yards without noticing it." In half an hour, the ships closed up together, and the captains of the other craft came on board in their boats. A hearty greeting was exchanged between them and the captain of La Belle Marie, and the 3 then descended to the cabin. After a time, they reappeared, and the visitors returned to their respective ships. 5 minutes later, the schooner got under way, and La Belle Marie followed her, leaving the other brig to continue her cruise alone. Toward evening, the schooner ran in toward a precipitous cliff, the brig keeping close in her wake. Ralph had no doubt that they were now close to the spot the privateers used as their rendezvous, but he could detect no opening into the cliff ahead, and it looked as if the schooner was leading the way to destruction. Not until within a cable's length of the shore could any opening be discovered by the keenest eye. Then, when the schooner was within her own length of the cliff, her helm was put about. She came round, and in a moment later disappeared. An exclamation of surprise broke from all on board the brig, for they now saw that instead of the cliff stretching in an unbroken line, it projected out at one point, and the precipitous headway concealed an extremely narrow passage behind it. A moment later, the brig imitated the maneuver of the schooner and passed in between 2 lofty cliffs so close that there were but a few yards to spare on either side of it. 50 yards ahead, the channel made a sharp turn again, and they entered a basin of tranquil water 300 or 400 yards across. At the further end, the shore sloped gradually up, and here several large storehouses had been erected, and ways laid down for the convenience of hauling up and repairing the vessels. "And what do you think of that, youngster?" Jacques said exultantly. "A grand hiding place, is it not?" "Oh, it is indeed," Ralph replied. "Why, they might cruise outside for weeks looking for the place, and they wouldn't find it, unless a boat happened to row along at the foot of the cliffs." As soon as the anchor was down, the crew were at once given leave to go ashore and ramble about to stretch their legs after their 2 months' confinement on board. Ralph was proceeding to take his place in one of the boats when the captain's eye fell upon him. "Come below with me, young fellow," he said in French. "Jacques Clery, I shall want you too." "I do not think there is much need to interpreting, Captain," the sailor said, as he followed the others into the cabin. The lad can get on very fairly in French now, and will certainly understand the sense of anything you may say to him. Look here, my lad, the captain began. You have been fairly treated since you came on board this brig. I have been very kindly treated, Ralph said. I have nothing whatever to complain of. And we saved your life, did we not? Yes, sir, after first nearly taking it, Ralph said with a smile. That is just as much your fault as ours. Little fish ought to get out of the way of great ones, and I don't consider we are in any way to blame in that matter. Still, there is the fact in the first place we saved your life, and in the second we treated you kindly. I acknowledge that, sir, Ralph said earnestly, and I feel very grateful. You might have sent me with the crew of that bark to prison had you chosen, and I am thankful to you that you kept me on board and have treated me as one of the crew. Now that I have to say to you is this, lad. I know that you are comfortable enough on board, and I have noticed that Jacques here has taken you specially under his wing. You work willingly and well and have the makings of a first-class seaman in you. Still, I can understand that you would much rather be with your own people and would be rather aiding them in capturing us than in aiding us to capture them. Consequently, you will, if you see an opportunity, probably try to escape. I shall take as good care as I can to prevent you from doing so, and shall shoot you without hesitation if I catch you at it. Still, you may escape, and I cannot run the risk of having this place discovered and our trade knocked on the head. I therefore offer you an alternative. You will either give me your solemn oath not, in any case, to reveal the existence of this place, or I will put you on shore in charge of the party who remain here, and you will stop with them a prisoner till we sail away from this cruising ground, which may be in 3 months, or maybe in a year. What do you say? But don't answer me hastily, and do not take the oath unless you are convinced you can keep it, however great the temptation holds out to you to betray us. Ralph needed but a minute to consider the proposition. The oath did not bind him in any way to abstain from making an attempt to escape, but simply to guard the secret of the privateer rendezvous. If he remained here on shore, he would have no chance whatever of escape, and might, moreover, meet with very rough treatment from those left in charge of him. I am quite ready to take the oath not to reveal the secret of this place, Captain, he said. I do not think that in any case, after having been so kindly treated by you, I should have been inclined to betray you. However, as you offer me the alternative, I am ready to take any oath you like of silence, and that oath I will assuredly keep, whatever pressure may be laid upon me, it being understood, of course, that the oath in no way prevents my taking any opportunity that may present itself of making my escape. That is quite understood, the captain said. That is a mere matter of business. You try to escape if you can, I shoot you if I catch you at it. But I do not think you are likely to succeed. But in justice to my employers and friends, I should not be justified in running even that slight risk, unless convinced that if you succeed, you will keep silence as to this. Now, what oath will you take? No oath can be more binding to me than my promise, sir, but at the same time, I swear upon my word of honor that I will never give any information or hint that will lead anyone to the discovery of this harbor. That will do, the captain said. I have liked your face from the moment you came on board, and I feel that I can trust your word. I am sure you can do that, Captain, Jacques put in. From what I have seen of the boy, I am certain that he will keep whatever promise he has made. Very well, then, the captain said. That is settled. You can go on shore in the next boat, and I shall advise you to take the opportunity. For I warn you that you will not get the chance of rambling on shore again until we return here next time. You need not come on board before tomorrow morning. Half an hour later, Ralph went ashore with the last batch of sailors. He soon found that a general license had been granted, a barrel of rum and several casks of wine had been broached, and the men were evidently bent upon making up for the spell of severe discipline that they had lately gone through. Jacques Cléry had gone ashore in the same boat with Ralph. What are you going to do, lad? I'm going for a walk, Ralph said. In the first place, everything is new to me, and I want to see the vegetation. And in the second place, I can see that in a very short time, most of the hands will be drunk, and I dare say quarrelsome, and I don't want either to drink or quarrel. Personally, I think I'm better away from them. You are right, boy, and I don't care if I go too. We will take a drink of wine before we start and fill our pockets with those biscuits. I'll get the scorekeeper to give us a bottle of wine to take with us, and then we shall be set up for the day. This is my first voyage in these parts, but I have heard from others of their doings and don't care about getting a stab with a knife in a drunken brawl. I can do my share of fighting when fighting has got to be done, but I do not care for rows of this sort. Still, I know the men look forward to what you call a spree on shore, and the captain might find it difficult to preserve discipline if he did not let them have their fling occasionally. Ralph and the sailor each took a biscuit and a draught of wine, and soon afterward started on their ramble, provided with food as arranged. Both were delighted with the luxuriant vegetation and wandered for hours through the woods admiring the flowers and fruits, abstaining, however, from tasting the latter, as for aught they knew some of the species might be poisonous. Presently, however, they came upon some bananas. Neither of them had ever seen this fruit before, but Ralph had read descriptions of it in books. Jacques had heard of it from the sailors who had visited the West Indies before. They therefore cut some bunches. Now we'll bring ourselves to an anchor and dine. Time must be getting on, and my appetite tells me that it must have struck 8 bells. Jacques sat down on the ground and was about to throw himself full length when Ralph observed a movement among the dead leaves. An instant later, the head of a snake was raised threateningly within striking distance of Jacques Cléry's neck. As he sank backward, Ralph gave a short cry, too late, however, to arrest the sailor's movements, and at the same moment sprang forward and came down with both feet upon the snake. "What on earth are you doing?" Jacques asked as he scrambled to his feet. No answer was made to his question, but he saw at once that Ralph had stamped upon the writhing folds of a snake. In a minute, the motion ceased. "That was a close shave, Jacques," Ralph said, smiling, though his face was pale with the sudden excitement. "I did not see it until too late to give you a warning. It was just a fraction of a second, and even as I jumped, I thought he would strike your neck before my boot came on him." "You saved my life, lad," the other said huskily, trembling from head to foot, as he saw how narrowly indeed he had escaped from death. "I have been in some hard fights in my time, but I don't know that ever I felt as I feel now. I feel cold from head to foot, and I believe that a child could knock me down." "Give me your hand, lad. It was splendidly done. If you had stopped for half a moment to think, I should have been a dead man. Good heavens, what an escape I had." "Oh, I'm glad to have been of service for once. You've been so kind to me since I came aboard the brig. It's fair that I should do you a good turn for once. I'm not surprised you're shaken, for I feel so myself. We had better both have a drink of wine, and then we can see about our meal." "No more lying on the ground for me," the sailor said. "Once is enough of such a thing as that. However, hand me the bottle. I shall feel better after that." Ralph looked about and presently discovered an open space free from fallen leaves or any other shelter for a lurking snake, and persuaded Jacques to sit down and eat his biscuit and bananas in comfort. The sailor did so, but the manner in which his glances kept wandering round him in search of snakes showed that he had not yet recovered his equanimity. When they had finished their meal, Ralph proposed that they should climb up to the highest point of ground they could find and take a view over the island. 2 hours' walking took them to the top of a lofty hill. From the summit they were enabled to obtain a distant view. The island was, they judged, some 7 or 8 miles across, and fully twice that length. Several small islands lay within a few miles distant, and high land rose 20 miles off. "This must be a large island," Ralph said. "Do you know where we are, Jacques?" "I have no idea whatever," the sailor said. "And I don't suppose anyone on board except the officers has, any more than me. The charts are all in the captain's cabin, and I know no more of the geography of these islands than I do of the South Seas, and that's nothing. It's quite right to keep it dark, because, though I don't suppose many fellows on board any of the 3 craft would split upon us if you were captured, because you see we each have a share in the profits of the voyage as well as our regular pay. And of course we should lose that if those storehouses, which are pretty well choked up with goods, were to be taken. There's never any saying what some mean scamp might do if he were offered a handsome reward. So the fewer as knows the secret, the better. Look, Jacques, look at that full-rigged ship that's just come out from behind that island. She looks to me like a frigate." "And that she is," the sailor replied. "Carries 40 guns, I should say, by her size. English, no doubt." "Well, we had better go back down again, lad. I must report to the captain that this craft is cruising in these waters. It will be dark before we are back, and I don't want to be in the woods after dark. There's no saying what one might tread on. I thought that we would stretch ourselves out under the trees for tonight and go aboard in the morning, but I feel different now. Bless you, I should never close an eye. So I propose as we goes down so as not to be noticed by them chaps up at the store, and then gets a hold of a boat and rows on board quiet." "I'm quite willing to do that, Jacques. I don't think I should get much sleep either in the woods." "No, I guess not, lad. Come along, the sun is halfway down already, and I would not be left in these woods after dark. Not for 6 months' pay. The thought of that snake makes me crawl all over. Who would have thought now, when I lugged you in over the bowsprit of La Belle Marie that night, in the channel, that you were going to save my life someday?" Well, I don't suppose, lad, I shall ever get quits with you, but if there's a chance, you can count on me. You come to me any night and say I'm going to escape Jacques, and I will help you do it, even if they riddle
I
me with
repeat,
bullets 5 minutes
I
after.
love Jacques.
Oh, I shall never ask that of you, Jacques, Ralph said warmly. I consider we're quits now, though you may not. Indeed, I can tell you that I don't consider that 2 months of kindness are wiped out by just taking a jump on the back of a snake. There were loud sounds of shouting, singing, and quarreling as they passed near the great fires that were blazing near the storehouse. They reached the waterside without notice and, taking a boat, rowed off to the brig. The captain looked over the side. Who is that? Jacques Claret, an English lad, Captain. You got tired of the noise on shore, I suppose, the captain said. Oh, not exactly that, Captain, for we have not yet been near the others at all. We took a long walk through the woods up to the top of the hill in the middle of the island, and we came back for 2 reasons. The first, because I had been so badly scared by a snake, who would have bit me had not this young lad leaped on my back just as he was about to strike me in the neck, that I would not have slept on the ground for anything. And in the second place, we came to tell you that from the top of the hill we saw a large frigate, English I should say from the cut of her sails, 5 or 6 miles off on the other side of the island, and I thought you ought to know about her at once. Thank you, Jacques. That is important. I was going to sail in the morning, but we must not stir as long as she is in the neighborhood. So this young fellow saved your life, did he? That he did, Captain, and it was the quickest thing you ever saw. I was just lying down at full length when he caught sight of the snake. There was no time to stop me, no time even to cry out. He just jumped on a sudden and came down on the brute as it was on the point of striking. Had he stopped for 1/4 of a second, I should have been a dead man hours ago. And that was a near escape indeed, Jacques. Are they pretty quiet there on shore? I heard them shouting several times. Oh, they seem quarreling a bit, Captain, but they are sure to do that with all that liquor on hand. They won't come to much harm, the captain said. I gave the strictest orders that all weapons should be left behind before they landed, and that any man carrying even a knife would have his leave stopped during the rest of the cruise. Besides, the first mate is there to look after them. I will go ashore myself at daybreak and take a look around from the top of that island. If that frigate is still cruising about near the island, it must be because they have got some sort of an idea of the whereabouts of our hiding place. We must wait till she moves away. It won't do to risk anything. Upon the following morning, the captain and Jacques, accompanied by Ralph, landed. They passed close by the storehouse and saw the men still asleep round the extinguished fires. The captain called out the storekeeper. You can serve out 1 pannikin of wine to each man, he said, but no more. They will want that to pull themselves together. Tell the first mate to get them on board as soon as possible and set them to work to tidy up the ship and get everything ready for setting sail at a moment's notice. Tell him an English frigate is reported as close to the island. I am going up to look after her. 2 hours steady walking took them to the top of the hill. There were no signs of any vessel as far as they could see. The captain, who had brought his glass with him, carefully examined every island in sight. Presently, he uttered an exclamation. There are 3 boats rowing together close under the cliffs there, he said, pointing to the nearest island. No doubt the frigate is lying behind it. They must be searching for some concealed harbor like ours. Peste. This is awkward. What do you think, Jacques? I should say you were right in what you said last night, Captain. They must have got an idea that our rendezvous is somewhere hereabouts, though they don't know for certain where, and they are searching all the island round. If they come along here like that, we shall be caught in a trap. A vessel might sail close by without suspecting there was an entrance here, however hard they might be looking for it. But if they send boats rowing along the shore, they couldn't help finding it. Still, there's nothing to prevent our sailing away now, as the island is between us and them. That is so, the captain said, but if they come while we are away, in the first place, they would capture all the booty in the stores. In the second place, they might lie quiet in the harbor and would sink the other ships when they returned. I will go down to the port again, Jacques, and will send up 2 of the men from the storehouse to keep watch here. Turn and turn about. Do you remain here until you are relieved. I will leave my glass with you. If there is anything fresh, leave the boy on watch and come down with the news yourself. I must talk this matter over with the mates. We have no direct interest in the stores, but we must do the best we can for our owners. Jacques and Ralph watched the distant boats through the glass until they disappeared around the end of the island. Then turned the glass seaward. Jacques was using it at the time. See, he exclaimed. There are 3 sails together there. Oh, I can see them plainly enough, Ralph said. What do you make them out to be? A schooner, a brig, and a 3-masted vessel. They are lying close together, and I fancy boats are passing between them. However, I couldn't swear to that. They must be 15 miles away. I expect they are our consorts and a merchantman they have captured. Can they see them from the other side of that island? Ralph asked excitedly. I should say they could, Jacques replied after pausing to calculate the line of sight. It depends how far around the frigate is lying and how close inshore. But if they've sent anyone up on the hill there, of course they can make them out as plainly as we can. Jacques handed the glass back to Ralph. Yes, I think I can make out our boats, Jacques. What do you suppose they're doing? Most likely they are transferring the valuable part of her cargo on board. Well, what will they do with her then? Oh, I expect they, but of course that depends whether she is a new ship and worth taking the risk of carrying her to France. They don't burn or sink her then? No, they would be no good in that, for they wouldn't know what to do with the crew. Of course, they don't want the bother of prisoners here, and they wouldn't want to turn them adrift in the boats. They might land on some island near and see us going and coming here and carry the news to some of your cruisers. No, I expect they will take what is valuable and let them go. That is, if the ship isn't worth sending home. I suppose that it is so in this case. For if they were going to put a prize crew on board and send it to France, they would not be transferring the cargo. Well, we shall see in another half hour. Chapter 5. The British Cruisers. An hour passed. During this time, the watchers on the hill saw that the brig had been lying alongside the three-masted vessel, and felt sure that the cargo was being transferred. Then the merchantman's sails were hoisted, and she slowly sailed away. For another hour, the other two craft lay motionless. Then they hoisted sail and headed for the island. There was a brisk, steady wind blowing, and they came along fast through the water. We shall soon see how now whether your frigate has made them out, Jacques said. But I will not wait any longer, but will go and tell the captain what is going on. In another hour, the others will be up here to relieve you. Then you can bring down the latest news. Left alone, Ralph watched anxiously the progress of the distant vessels, turning the glass frequently toward the other island, beyond the end of which he momentarily expected to see the white sails of the frigate appear. An hour passed. The schooner were now within about 4 miles of the nearest point of the island, and still there were no signs of the English ship. Presently, he heard voices behind him, and 2 French sailors came up. Ralph was now free to return, but he thought he had better wait until the brig and schooner reached a point where they would be hidden by the island from the sight of anyone who might be watching on the hill 6 miles away. In another half hour, they'd reached this point. No sign had been seen of the frigate, and Ralph felt sure that she must have been anchored in some bay, whose headland prevented her seeing the approaching craft. For had she noticed them, she would assuredly have set out to intercept them before they reached the island, which lay almost dead to windward of them. He was just turning to go when one of the men gave a sudden exclamation. He turned round again and saw the frigate just appearing from behind the other island. She was close-hauled, and it was soon evident by her course that she was beating up for the point round which the other 2 ships had disappeared. Ralph was puzzled at this, for if she had made out the brig and schooner, her natural course would have been to have made for the other end of the island, so as to cut them off as they sailed past it, whereas they would now, when they gained the extremity of the island, find themselves 5 or 6 miles astern of the other 2 craft. The French sailors were equally puzzled, and there was a hot argument between them, but they finally concluded that her appearance at that moment must be accidental, and she could not have made out the privateers. They had just told Ralph to run down with the news to the harbor, when a light was thrown upon the mystery, for from the other end of the island from which the frigate had emerged, a large schooner appeared. Every sail was set, and her course was directed toward this other end of the island, upon which the watchers were standing. The 2 French sailors burst out into a torrent of oaths, expressing of surprise and alarm, for it was evident that from the course the schooner was taking, she intended to intercept the 2 privateers and engage them until the frigate came to her assistance. "Run, boy, run for your life," one of them exclaimed, "and tell the captain, but no, wait a moment." And he directed the glass upon the schooner. "1,000 curses," he exclaimed. "It is the Cerf schooner the English captured from us 6 months ago. She is the fastest craft in these waters. Tell the captain that I am coming after you, but your legs will beat mine." Ralph dashed off at full speed, but as soon as he had fairly distanced the French sailor, he began to run more slowly. For the moment, he had so entered into the feelings of his companions that he had identified himself with them. But now that he had time to think, his sympathies swung round to the English ship. He did not particularly want La Belle Marie to be captured, for he had been so well treated on board her that he felt no ill will toward her, but her capture meant his deliverance. He thought over the matter as he ran and wondered first why the frigate did not take the line to cut the privateers off, instead of going round by the other end of the island. He could only suppose that it was because the schooner was the fastest vessel, and was more likely to arrive in time at the point. Besides, if she showed there before the privateers reached the point, they might double back again, and the frigate would make the other end of the island before they were halfway back. It might be, too, that the captain had suspected the truth, knowing that the privateers had a rendezvous somewhere in that neighborhood, and that his object in remaining so long behind the island was to give them time to enter their port in ignorance of his being in the neighborhood. At any rate, the great thing was that the schooner and brig should enter the little harbor before knowing that they were pursued. Once in, it would be impossible for them to get out again and beat offshore, with the wind blowing dead on the land, before both the schooner and frigate had rounded their respective ends of the island. Therefore, although Ralph ran fast enough to keep well ahead of the sailor, he made no effort to keep up a greater rate of speed than was necessary for this. As soon as he reached the shore, a boat rowed off from the brig to fetch him. He saw with satisfaction that although the men were all on board, no preparations were made for getting underway at once, and indeed the captain would have no anxiety for his own ship, as he would know that the privateers, if they saw the frigate coming out to meet them, would sail right away from the island, and the frigate would be sure to pursue until out of sight of land. "What news, boy?" the captain asked as the boat came alongside. "Is the frigate in chase of the others?" "Yes, sir," Ralph replied. "The frigate and schooner are both in chase." "Which way are they bearing?" "The privateers do not know they are chased, sir. The frigate did not show round the island over there until the schooner and brig were hidden behind the end of this island. She may draw the western end, and the schooner is making for the eastern end. The sailors who came up told me to tell you that the schooner is the Surf, one of the fastest vessels out here." The captain uttered an exclamation of dismay, which was echoed by those standing round him. "Row out through the entrance," he shouted to the coxswain of the boat, "and warn the others of the danger. Tell them to make straight out. If they come in here, we shall all be caught in a trap together."
No, I'm good. Thank you.
The oars dipped in the water, but before the boat was fairly in motion, there was an exclamation. The headsail of the schooner glided in past the projecting
It's just
cliff.
I screen
A moment
cast my
later, the
screen.
whole vessel came into view. "Bring the boat back alongside," the captain shouted. "I will go on board
I mean,
her at
I
once. She
am.
may get out
That's
in
what I'm
time yet."
doing.
As the schooner rounded
I'm
up,
live
her
streaming.
sails came down and she headed straight
Thank
toward the
you.
brig. The captain of the Belle Marie stood up on the stern sheet of the boat, shouting and waving his hands and gesticulating to them to get up sail again. Those on board the schooner looked on in surprise, unable to guess his meaning. "There are 2 English cruisers, one coming around each end of the island," he shouted as he approached the schooner. "Get out again if you can, otherwise they must catch us all in here." The captain in the schooner at once saw the emergency and roared out orders. The boats were all lowered at once, and the men tumbled on board. Hawsers were lowered from the bows, and they began at once to tow her head round, for there was not a breath of wind in the landlocked harbor. "How much time have we got?" the captain asked as the schooner's head came slowly around. "I don't know," the other captain replied. "It's a question of minutes, anyhow. Ah, here is the brig." And the boat dashed forward, and he gave similar orders to those that had been given to the schooner. "Get them both round," the captain shouted. "I will row out through the entrance and give you warning if these accursed cruisers are in sight." The boat dashed through the narrow entrance and at once felt the full force of the breeze. "Dead on shore," the captain muttered. "He will have to work right out into the arms of one or the other of them." They rowed 100 yards out when, beyond the furthest point they could see to the east, the sails of the schooner were perceived. "Take her round," the captain said sharply. "It's too late now. We've got to fight for it." They rowed back through the entrance. The schooner, slowly towed by her boats, was approaching. "It's no use," the captain said. "You are too late. The schooner has rounded the end of the island, and with this breeze we'll be here in half an hour. You never can work out in time. Besides, they would see you come out, and even if you got away, which you couldn't do, they'd come back and capture the depot. We've got to fight for it, that's evident, and the boats of a fleet could hardly make their way in here. We had best get the 3 craft moored with their broadsides to the entrance. We'll blow the boats to tinder if they try to come in, and then we can load up with all the most valuable goods and slip out at nighttime. That is our only chance."
That's the end of it.
He saw at once that the other's advice was the only one
Yeah,
to be
that's
followed. It
all
would be
the
impossible to beat off the shore before the schooner came up.
Nice.
And while they were talking, the frigate appeared
I
round the other end of the
really
island.
like her full body.
We therefore
Hi!
returned to the harbor.
Hi,
The
Drawling.
Belle Marie's anchors
Hi.
raised and the three vessels
I'm just
moored
about
head to
finished.
stern across the harbor, 100 yards from the entrance.
It's good to see you. How are you
As soon as
doing?
this was done, strong parties were sent ashore from each of the vessels, and 6 heavy ship's guns that had been landed from some captured vessel were dragged from their place near the storehouse and planted on the heights, so as to sweep the narrow channel. It was late in the evening before this was done, and an earthwork thrown up to shelter the men working.
Just a little bit.
Fire. In the meantime, the 2 ships of war
I
had
actually
met
don't know
outside,
when I started, so I
and
don't know
again
how long it's
separating,
been.
cruised several times from end to end of the rocky wall, evidently searching for the entrance through which the privateers they had been pursuing had so suddenly disappeared. In the morning, the French sailors were at work early, and 2 or 3 strong chains were fastened across the mouth of the passage.
Unfortunately, at this point in time, I don't actually know what days I'm going to be streaming.
We are ready to give them a
I'm
warm reception.
trying to consistently do Saturdays. That is my current, that's my current goal. Other than that, just whenever I have a free day and have some time, which is what this one was, I made a post like an hour before I started saying that I was going to do an impromptu stream. But other than that, there's not really much I can do. Yeah, sorry. You could turn notifications on, and it should notify you.
Abreast at a distance of 30 or 40 yards of the shores. They stopped rowing at the mouth of the entrance and were suddenly hailed by the captain of the schooner, who was standing on the cliff above. "If you try to enter," he said, "you will be destroyed at once. We don't want to harm you if you will leave us alone, but we have guns enough to blow a whole fleet out of water, and will use them if we are driven to it." "Thank you for your warning," a voice shouted back from the boats, and then an order was given, and they rowed back to the ships. "Well, have you found the place, Lieutenant Pearson?"
Well, I just finished shading, Ashley,
"Yes, sir."
the same person I was doing last time, and now I'm just adding the final details. I just signed it with my name, and then, I gotta figure out what to, like, put in the space down below her little, like, side profile. Up top, I'm gonna put her name.
This makes a sharp turn at the other end and opens out. We saw nothing of the vessels we were chasing yesterday, but on high ground facing the channel, there's a battery of 6 guns planted so as to rake anything coming in. There are some chains across the end as well. While we were lying on our oars,
I'm gonna be completely honest.
he then repeated the warning
I've
that had
forgotten
been
which
given.
direction L's go.
Nasty place to get into.
The L's in my language, not L's
Very
in
nasty,
real
isn't it?
life. I know what
You
those
see,
look
the
like.
guns would play right down into the channel. Then there are the chains to break down and perhaps more batteries and certainly the ships to tackle when they get inside. "Is there width for the frigate to enter?" the captain asked. "Just width, I should say, and no more, sir. We should certainly have to get the yards braced fore and aft, but the ship itself would go through with something to spare, I would say." "What depth of water is there close inshore?"
You know,
"Oh,
that's
plenty of
really
depth,
not
sir,
a bad
right up to the
idea.
foot of
Let
the
me do
cliff.
that.
But of course I can say nothing as to the depth in the channel. No, of course not, the captain said.
I'm gonna make
But
this
it's something that
small.
we have run these
Okay.
pests to earth at last, but I see it's going to be no easy matter to get at them.
I'll come back and redo that.
The captain now signaled
down
to
in
the
this
captain of the
corner.
schooner to come on board,
Really
and when
nice
he did
and
so, the 2
small.
officers retired to the cabin together and had a long consultation. The young officer, on coming on deck, got into his boat and, taking Lieutenant Pearson with him, rowed for the cliffs, a few hundred yards to the west of the inlet.
That was a really good
There they
idea.
could obtain a view of the channel and its surroundings. Not a man was
Yeah.
to be seen. The muzzles of the 6 guns pointed menacingly down into the passage, and the chains could be seen just above the water's edge. "I think we will go back now, Mr. Pearson. I really think we ought to be very much obliged
Okay.
to those fellows for not
I
sinking
have an
us."
idea for the language
wonder what was their motive in
because
letting us
I
off so
have
easily.
it.
"Oh, I suppose they feel pretty confident that our report is not likely to encourage an attack.
Here.
And they think that if they were to blow us to pieces, it would only make Captain Wilson the more determined to destroy them. At least that's the conclusion I came to as I rode back last time." "Yes, I should think that is it," the young captain said. "It's certainly as awkward a looking place to
Well,
attack
this
in
isn't the
boats as
best
I
way
ever
to do
saw.
it, but it will work.
Of course, were it not for the chains, my vessel could get in, and I dare say she had been
Just
there
taking
many a time before we
pictures.
captured her. But it would be a very risky thing to take the frigate in without knowing anything of the depth of water, either in the channel or inside. Both officers returned to the frigate. Mr. Pearson's report is fully borne out, Captain Wilson. It would be a most desperate enterprise to attack with our boats. Half of them would be sunk before they got to the chains, and even if they got past them, which I doubt, there's no saying what difficulties and obstacles may be inside. And now about the frigate, Captain Chambers. Well, sir, that is for you to decide. I'm quite ready to take the schooner in, though with the plunging power of that battery raking her fore and aft, I say fairly that it would be a desperate enterprise. And if she had not sufficient way upon her to carry away the chains, nothing could save her. As to the frigate, it seems to me that she would run an equal risk with the schooner, with the additional danger that there may not be enough water for her. Well, it certainly doesn't seem to be an easy nut to crack, Captain Wilson said.
I'm going to be completely honest. I basically just scribbled around on a piece of paper until I thought, that looks like a symbol that could be a letter. That's alright. And then I just assigned it a letter, and then that was it.
It's no use anchoring here and trying to starve them out.
It took me a while. And some of them are very obvious what they are.
If the weather were to turn bad, we should have to make
off
at once. It would never do to be
for
caught in a
first-time
hurricane on such a
language,
coast as that on
I
our lee.
think it's okay.
I might send you to Port Royal with a letter to the Admiral asking him to send us 2 or 3 more
I need
ships.
to figure out what her
But I
last
don't like
name
doing
is,
that when it's a mere question of capturing 2
'cause
rascally
I don't
privateers.
remember.
Oh, I think the Admiral would be glad to send them, the young captain said, for these 2 vessels have done a tremendous lot of damage during the last year. I believe that upward of 20 ships have reported being boarded and stripped by them. But if they came, what could they do? Captain Wilson asked. You see, we consider it's not worth the risk of throwing away 2 ships to force this passage. Still less would it be to risk 4.
You know what? I take it back.
There
I
is
see
no
it.
doubt, Captain Chambers agreed. I should
I guess they
suggest
do.
that however many of us there may be, we should all draw off and keep a watch at a distance. Of course, it would be necessary to approach at night
Quincy,
and to lie
that's
behind
her
the
last
island
name.
somewhere in the daytime,
That's
just as we
perfect.
did
I
yesterday.
never use cues.
For from the top of that hill, they can see any distance round.
Quincy.
Yes, and as soon as it's dusk, they'll have 2 or 3 hours to get away before we can come around here. Besides, with their night glasses from the top of the cliffs, they'll be sure to be able to make us out. There's only one other way that I can see of getting at them, and that is to find a landing place and attack them from on shore. Oh, yes, that's a much more hopeful business as far as I saw yesterday. There are cliffs all round the island, but it's hard indeed if we cannot find some place where we can manage to effect a landing. This is the plan we must follow out. This afternoon, an hour before it gets dark, you get up sail and make away as if you were bound for Port Royal.
Ashley Quincy.
I shall keep my station
Let's
here.
see.
They will think you have gone off to get some more ships. As soon as it's
That would
thoroughly
be really
dark, bear
fun.
round
I'd
and
love
come
to
back
see
to
what
the
other
island.
people come up with
Bring
doing
the
this.
schooner in close to the cliffs on the other side and get into a bay.
Random question. I need to fill up this space down here with like fun facts about her or just details. What would be things that you would want to know about a character that I can put there? I can't really think of anything
About 2
right now.
miles off the land,
I could just leave
and
it
we'll
blank
show
and
a
come
light
back
to
to it, I
seaward so
guess.
that you'll know where to find me. Then we can talk matters over and you can get back to the other side again before morning. Where the captains of the 2 English vessels were holding consultations, a similar talk was going on between the 3 captains of the privateers. And the conclusion they arrived at was precisely similar to that of the English officers. It was agreed that no attack was likely to be made.
Cool. Cool. Do I know what her personality is? Questionable. How would I describe her? I can't think with my sound going. Hold on. I'm
The
gonna
first
turn
gale
that
from the north, they must run for shelter, and before...
off. Pause. Okay, let's see. She's reserved and snarky. I think those. That sounds really weird because, like, if you're reserved, you wouldn't really, like, talk much. But, like, she doesn't. But when she does, it's snarky. I think, yeah, that fits. Alright, okay. Reserved. I'm gonna say sassy. I feel like that fits better. Sassy. Yeah, I will, because I know how to read it. My biggest problem was I keep forgetting which way. Okay, I keep forgetting 3 specific letters that I use all the time. Like I'll write notes in church in this code language thing. And I always like go back and forth on which one's an N and which one's an M, cuz they're basically identical. They're just backwards. So like if I'm reading my notes, I can figure out which one I meant to use just from the rest of the word. But yeah. Also L's, cuz I was pretty sure it's like a backwards 7, because it wouldn't have made sense for me to use a 7 as the L. But no, the L just looks like a backwards 7, and I feel like I need to change it, because if I get sloppy with my lettering, the L ends up looking like an M, which isn't really what you want, because you want to be able to tell that it's an L. So I might change that. Alright, so her personality, she's reserved and sassy. She likes coffee. I'm gonna write coffee addict. That sounds accurate. Am I allowed to say addict? Will I get blocked for that? I also think part of my problem earlier, and I needed to go look up the language, was because I struggle with listening to something and writing at the same time when I'm listening to and writing about 2 separate things. So like I can take notes, but I can't do stuff like that. Oh, this is important. No, now I gotta come up with what the word for like these nerds. You know, like Harry Potter nerds are called Potterheads, and Wingfeather Saga nerds. Well, I call us Featherlings. So I don't care what anyone else calls us. I call us Featherlings. But like everybody has that like word. I need to figure out the word. There's this book series that she is a nerd about. Well, obviously, because I made up the language, so I learned it that way, I guess, because I wrote it, so I knew it. But like to memorize it, I did a thing. Ah, goodness, it was about 2 years ago now, I think. I was writing out Bible verses in the language, and I just wrote it over and over again until I had memorized the verse. But then by that point, I remembered how to do all the letters, so I knew how to read it. And that helped me a lot with my writing, reading, comprehension of it. Just lots of repetition. Anyway, I think it's the Brago Chronicles. Hold on, let me go check. Yeah. So actually, this hoodie right here is a nerdy thing of that. The book she reads. It says just the legend in the making. But then I also have this design. And it says not hibernating, just sleeping. Said by Brago from the Brago Chronicles. Okay. Yeah, I probably will end up writing the words in English and just have 2 different versions of the picture. I just like writing it in my language because the language is for the books. So, I don't know. I know it confuses other people. I think part of that's the fun of it. Just no one can tell what it says but me. um, I don't know, the Brago Chronicles. I don't know, what do people call, like, Star Wars nerds? What are we called? Come back over here. I really like how this turned out, especially the shading on, like, the full body one. Oh, well, it's just pronounced like English at the moment. I do not have, like, phonetics for anything. And if I did, like, come up with a different phonetical alphabet, I don't know. I don't know, man. This would not be it. I don't know. I don't know how to do that. Oy. Funny enough, I actually tried writing, like, a completely different language once. Like, it used English, like, I guess they're Roman. Wait. The Roman alphabet? That's what it's called, right? I don't know. We used the letters that we use in the English language. They're not English letters because lots of different languages use them, so I don't know. Okay. What are Star Wars nerds called? Oh, cool. We're usually just called nerds or geeks. That's fun. I could just say a Brago nerd, I guess. That'll work for now. Let's see. No. Yeah, there we go. No, went too fast. Can't tell if it's even or not. It's decently straight. Okay. Okay, let's see. Coffee addict, Brago nerd. I'm gonna say that's good enough for now. I like it. I like how it turned out. I love finishing a project. It just feels so good. Like translating my book, you mean? I have. And honestly, it would be really fun to do someday. I have actually when I was younger, and like I was mentioning, I was coming up with that language with, I should correct myself. I was not coming up with it by myself. I was coming up with it with my older sister because we have not worked on it in years, but we have this story idea that honestly I would like to try to flesh out at some point. But right now I'm focusing on my books. Um and we came up with this language to go with it, and we did not have a ton of words. We had maybe 100, which honestly that's 100 words. That's still a decent amount. We could hold mini conversations in it. And we had talked about when we do end up publishing it, what would be fun is I've seen some books that have like it has a second language, but instead of like having the English words and then the other language right underneath it or something so you can like translate it, you read through to the halfway point of the book. And it's the complete book. The complete book is just to the halfway point of the book. And then you turn the book upside down and start from the back, which is now the front, and then you read it in a different language. And I thought that would be so cool to do for our story, and you could read it in our own language. So, yeah, stuff like that, where, like, oh, translating it, that'd be cool. I would probably honestly translate it to French first because that's the language that I know the most of. But I am not fluent in any way, shape, or form, and I cannot speak in it. I can kind of read it, but I cannot keep up with people if they're speaking it. I can barely keep up when people are speaking English because my brain just takes a few seconds to actually recognize what's being said to me. And if I had to recognize what was being said to me and translate it, because I don't think in French. So, like, I'd hear the French words and then I'd have to translate it to English so I would understand what's being said. I would be so far behind in the conversation, I would not have any clue what's going on. So, bonjour. I am. I finished. Do you want to see? This is Clara.
Hello.
It's just Drawling and I right now. Say hi.
Hello. Ooh, pretty.
So it's Ashley Quincy.
Mm-hmm.
And then down here it says sarcastic reserve. Well, so no, it's not, sorry. It says reserved sassy. I was going to write sarcastic, then I moved it to sassy. And then coffee addict and no, I need to write core cat addict because it's core cat, not coffee. And then whoops. And then Brago nerd because I can't think of like a word to describe what they're nerdy. Because you know, like Harry Potter nerds are called Potterheads, and Wing Feather Saga nerds are called I call them featherlings. I don't care what anyone else calls them. Other people call them featherheads, and I'm like, but we could be featherlings.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, don't do that. Doesn't she look so cool?
Yes. And I love the
sparkles.
signature.
Sparkles. So, yeah. Are you needing to go to bed now?
Yeah, but I don't care if you're still talking or whatever. I just need to be
Oh.
up at tomorrow at 5:25.
Well, that's okay. I finished this, so I can go. Sorry, Drawling. I have a roommate now. I didn't used to have a roommate. We moved, and now I have a roommate again. So.
And I'm evil.
She is. Please send help. So I'm gonna need to go. Thank you for stopping by. I'm sorry that I didn't really give you a very good heads up or whatever. I hope you have a good night, and I'm gonna try to figure out schedule and stuff. So yeah. Anyway, yeah, good night.
Good night.
Bye. Oh, what did I? Darn. Or clear. Yeah, bye.